Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel. Today, I wanted to talk about this phenomenon called creeping normalcy. And so I want to take you back to times when you have been out and about. Maybe you've been on vacation, maybe you've been in a different town, maybe even just lost in your own town. And maybe you come across a part of town that's not so nice, right? We're talking the part of town where the buildings are a bit dilapidated. We have derelict cars in the street. Maybe houses are kept in ill repair. Just a part of town that seems like it's seen better days. Well, why is that? Right? Why is that? And why, when we have things like new institutions and new hospitals and new healthcare systems being formed, why then, how quickly we can go from the mission, vision, and values of the original statement to a culture that might be, say, backbiting or worse, backstabbing, right? How do we go from something from the intent, the original, to something later that is a much more negative version of that original? Well, it's the phenomenon of creeping normalcy, right? And that is when events, negative events, happen over a course of time that seem normal, right? After a while of houses being in disrepair, it just seems normal. Where in a quote unquote good neighborhood, the houses would be repaired immediately. So if these things were to happen immediately, if a good neighborhood turned into a bad neighborhood overnight, it would cause a huge uproar. But over time, this idea of creeping normalcy comes in, and we end up having something that's a much lesser version of the original intent. And I think about this with hospital culture. It's like, how do we have one culture in a certain department and then another department that has a totally different culture, right? How do we have a floor that's got a great culture, but then another floor that has a terrible culture? This is the idea of creepy normalcy. When something starts off really good and positive and mission focused, and then the intent gets lost, and then things start to slip a little bit. And then things become less quality. And when it's less quality, there's less intention, less care put into it. When we hear about creepy normalcy, a lot of people may think back to that old analogy of, if you take a pot of boiling water and you drop a frog into it, the frog will jump out. But if you take a pot of cool water and put a frog in it and then slowly add the heat, the frog will boil to death. Don't do this at home, right? We don't need to be cruel to animals. But I think we all understand that point, that over time, when something seems normal, it can actually end up being rather destructive. So how do we guard against creeping normalcy? First off, we stay mission focused. We think back often on the mission, vision, and values of the organization. And we also remember that maybe it's that simple old phrase that if it is to be, it's up to me. We all hold a part in making the culture of an organization, a department, a floor, a unit. We all hold some responsibility in that. And when we look over safety protocols, or we look over just decent conduct amongst workers, then we start to see some creeping normalcy come in. And we've got to stop that. So when you see something that is not in line with the mission, vision, and values of your organization, stop and maybe even point it out, and maybe do whatever you need to do to make sure that you are not a part of that creepy normalcy, of that erosion of culture. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If you have thoughts on creepy normalcy, or if you've seen it in your place of employment, why don't you drop me a line, and please remember to rate, review, share, subscribe, all of those good things about the podcast if you like it. Again, I'm Marcus Engel. Thank you for joining me for Compassion and Courage.